happening with Shadow, Starshine, and Kim. And Kim is taking the view that philosophy is obsolete to science and the pursuit of objective truth. Shadow is taking the opposition. As always, winner will be based upon who concedes. We don't get a vocal concession from either participant. We'll decide the winner upon the popular vote of the audience who is here for at least 75% of the debate. There'll be mild moderation, meaning I'll only step in when there's just a lot of over talking or one of you just asks for a mod. And also, I just want to remind everyone that there's no obligation to stay in the debate. So if you feel like at any point you made your case, you can just call for a vote or just ask a mod to end the debate, and we'll just conclude it there. That being said, thank you both for debating. You can get into it.
Okay. I actually prepared an opening. I don't know if you did, Kim.
I didn't prepare at all for this one.
Okay, great.
What I was thinking, though, is that in this one, you would mostly be the one on the offensive, and I'll just defend since I already did a version of this debate. You know, in this one, I guess I'll just be, I'll allow you to be the attacker the whole time, and I'll just see what you have for me.
Okay. I mean, that's one way to go, but you did make a proposition which you think is true. So hopefully you
Right.
have
I
something to offer.
can like make an opening statement for the proposition, but for most of the debate, I'm fine with just being on the defensive, basically.
Uh-huh. Okay. Anyways, I'm going to start with my opening and we'll just take it from there, okay?
All right.
All right. So I put it into 3 points why I have a problem with the proposition philosophy is obsolete to science in the pursuit of objective truth. In point form, we have that science and philosophy are such distinct things as to be separated in this way. I challenge that. Another one is that philosophy could ever be obsolete to another discipline. And 3, that what science is something that even pursues objective truth. To my first point, I mean, I would have to ask how you conceptualize philosophy, but as I see it, philosophy is the discipline which applies critical thinking to foundational bodies of knowledge. And one of the core areas of study for philosophy is epistemology, which concerns itself with the nature of belief, knowledge, and justification. This also includes how we obtain knowledge. In this, we can see that science is a method, is a methodology and justification for obtaining knowledge. This places science as a product of philosophy, as a form of epistemology, and not some sort of distinct entity outside of philosophy. My second point, that if there was objective truth to be sought, the principles found within logic and critical thinking, which are philosophical domains, would be paramount to its success. The elimination of fallacious thinking, the laws that govern our thought, to common statistical errors are all domains of philosophy and not science. Science will always rely on these skills when forming hypotheses and reasoning through discovered data. In addition, topics that philosophy uniquely covers, such as the investigation of ethics, mind, language, are not simply reducible to the scientific method. To my third point, science as a pursuit of objective truth is highly questionable. First, we have the classic problem of induction, one which I've yet to see a satisfying answer to beyond pragmatic considerations. And if pragmatic considerations is the best we have on offer, then objective truth may be beyond human scope. Some of the most popular forms of scientific methodology, such as the Popperian view of science, do not seek truth, but only the elimination of falsehoods. A Kuhnian view of science shows a scientific revolution in the light of human values and interests. And feminist critiques of science question the most fundamental assumptions of objective truth in science. I would throw it to my opponent to give his understanding of science such that as an objective truth is even something science can find. Is there any of those points you'd want to start with?
Yeah, so first of all, the science and its ability to basically obtain objective truths. There are objective truths that are objective within a limited system. So whether you want to say that the universe in which we live in is a simulation or it's an illusion based on like how we perceive quantum waveforms or whatever, there are ways that things behave within the system that we exist within, which we call the universe, and science is the most accurate and reliable tool which humanity has as of yet devised to find truths about the behavior of how things act within this system. So
Right.
that so
Do you know what the
that refers specifically to the behavior of objects and phenomena within the physical reality in which we live, what's physically observable and testable within this reality. And so within that context, science is the most objective tool that humanity has to derive truths. And you say also that science, you basically conflate science as basically being like a branch of philosophy, when in reality, science is an outgrowth of a branch of philosophy called natural philosophy, and it's basically like something that evolved out of philosophy. It's not considered really philosophy anymore, although it has similarities. Like there are similarities, and of course the root of science itself, it stems from philosophy. I'm not denying that, but
Mhm.
science has basically evolved into something else because it deals specifically with objective reality in the context of what's objective in a physical sense in terms of the behavior of physical phenomena. And so what we're dealing with here is not a form of philosophy, because philosophy can be, like scientific, like philosophy can be scientific, but science itself, like it doesn't require you to be scientific or objective to be a philosopher. You don't have to base anything in truth, actually, to be a philosopher. You can literally deal with totally conceptual things. And that's actually, the abstract is actually what philosophy deals with, because science is dealing with a higher level of truth than like the abstract truths that a philosopher comes up with. And what science comes from is philosophers trying to cross over from just like rationalizing things
Yeah, I
or
mean, you're making
creating
just like too
systems that
many
exist
points.
conceptually, and trying to deal with the actual physical reality we live in. And science has evolved out of that to a point where you need
I don't know
that
what you mean by evolved out of it.
as your reference in order to call yourself a scientist. You can't do
Hello?
science
Are you
without
there?
reference to physical reality, but you can do philosophy without any basis in what you call knowledge. And that goes to the last thing I want to say, which is that I object to your definition of philosophy, basically, because you say a philosopher is a person who applies critical thinking to foundational bodies of knowledge.
Mhm.
And then you define the foundational bodies of knowledge by what makes a body of knowledge foundational is that other bodies of knowledge tend to rely on the assumptions found within those foundations. So you use the word assumptions, and that's like a huge problem, because if it's knowledge, then it's not an assumption. And if what makes something foundational is that other systems of like thinking basically are based on it, well then I can say that like Juche, since I'm Kim Jong Un, is correct because it's based on Marxism or something. Like,
Are you
like
done?
you see how science is structurally more objective than what
No.
you are defining philosophy as, and philosophy, by your definition, doesn't need to be connected to any kind of reality, but since science does, that makes it more objective.
No, not at all. I
All
mean,
right.
you're
Well,
saying the fact that science is connected to reality somehow makes it more objective, but one of the fundamental assumptions that we start with in order to do science is the fact that there is an objective reality outside of us, when generally the most fundamental thing about us is our own experience of the world. That doesn't make an objective world. Like you said, we have options like simulationism or solipsism or any of those sorts of things. Some of the most fundamental assumptions is that there is an objective reality in order to begin to do science. So these are some of the assumptions that science has to operate, and these are sorts of the things that philosophy would cover, as whether or not those are reasonable assumptions. You seem to think that philosophy is something that just makes up whatever. Like you look at the word assumption and you say that, hey, okay, I guess you can just assume anything and go about your day. But one of the principal parts of philosophy is justification, which is one of the aspects of knowledge, is so long as we're going off of the justified true belief understanding of it. And so what makes a reasonable belief is a domain of science, or is a domain of philosophy. I don't know how you're saying science has evolved off of it. I don't even know what you mean by that. um, I maybe you can elucidate what you think philosophy is, and how science can evolve off of it, such that it's no longer a aspect of philosophy as a whole.
well, like I already said, like I'm not denying that things in science are like based on philosophy.
Mhm.
Like would you call like the scientific method itself though, or like any methodology a kind of philosophy? Because I like separate those two things. I see science as a methodology. It's not a belief system, and it's not a philosophy, and that's why any assumption philosophically that you claim you need to make to do science, basically, like it relies on like some prerequisite that you hold to some philosophical outlook in order to like validate scientific conclusions. That's not true, because it's like science is done within the context of like knowing what its limits are. Like you are looking at a physical phenomenon, and you're observing and categorizing, and you're looking at what its properties are. Like that, like it's not something that you need to attach to any philosophical outlook on life or whatever. It's, does light move at this speed? Okay, it moves at that speed. That's literally what science is.
Well, okay, let's see if that's true. Do you know what the problem of induction is?
I'm familiar, like, basically with the concept of induction. Yeah.
Well, the problem of induction is that any observed phenomenon that we have, how can we say that in the future that is exactly how it will behave? Now, one of the first things that you said was that the world works on systems, and that science, learns about these systems and figures them out. But how do you know that the universe will continue to operate as a system from observed phenomenon? It's not like you observe the future. It's not like you observe the system. What you do is you observe events, and then you believe that those events are characterized by systems, and then you write down what you think
Well,
those
we
systems
can't
might be.
prove that the sun is gonna rise tomorrow, but we're both pretty damn sure that the sun is gonna rise tomorrow. So
Well, I'm
like
not
we don't
asking
need
whether or
to
not we're
we don't
sure.
need
I'm
to we don't
asking how
need to
you can say
believe
that's an
we don't
objective
need to
truth.
believe. Like, I don't see what the argument is. We don't need to believe that anything's gonna be a certain way. Science like
Science
just
what?
looks at what things do. Like
Uh-huh.
that's all it does.
Does it
It just
look at
looks at what
does it
things
look
do.
at systems or the future? Is that part of the observation?
Yeah, it projects models of the future, but there's no belief involved necessarily. Like you don't have to believe in literally anything to perform scientific methodology.
So you don't believe that there's a system. Then why are you writing them down as systems?
Because it is served as an accurate way of coming up with accurate conclusions that have proved to be true and do seem to be true and are actually functional in the reality that we live, such that we've literally created countless types of technology based on what we've concluded based on science, and we've been
No,
able to
I'm
use
not
that.
doubting any of that, and I don't need to doubt any of that. What I'm asking is, how do you know that those future projections will hold? Do
You
you
don't
think they will?
necessarily know, and you don't have to believe that you know. You
Okay,
just have to rely on the best that you can do, but by you know
right. And this is what
doing
I
the
said
best
in my
science you
opening:
can
is that
do,
the
and
best
you don't say,
reaction to it are pragmatic considerations and not as some sort of objective truth. Yet your proposition is that science is in the pursuit of objective truth. Now, if what you said is that science makes reliable models or useful models that are good to base your considerations on, okay, maybe I wouldn't have had so much disagreement. But what you're saying is objective truth. And now what you're coming back with me is saying that this is useful, this is pragmatic, and this is the problem. These are not the same thing.
well, that's the thing, though. It has proven over and over again to be objectively true that computers work. Like that's just one example, but like computers function the way they do. We know how they function. We're able to build computers and reproduce those over and over again. Like we've gained the knowledge using science of how to construct a computer and how a computer operates, what the physics behind that are, and it works over and over again. So like even if you say that technically we can't prove that things are like in certain instances that they're going to remain the same, like that the laws of physics, let's say the laws of physics just change somehow or whatever, like
Mhm.
even if you could say that, it doesn't change the fact that within the limited frame of what we need to be objective, it's objectively true. Like it is objectively true for the time period so far that we've needed it to be true in order to say that for the time it was true, at least it was true before it like before the laws of physics just magically changed.
So do you take that what science is a historical account of what has happened, and that says nothing about models of the future?
Well, no, because the models of the future are very, very often correct.
Well, what does that have to do with whether or not they are objectively true?
Because they've proven themselves to be closer to objectively true than what some philosopher like conceptualized they might have been without using scientific methodology.
I don't know what you mean by closer to being true, since you're trying to say that because it's occurred in the past, it will occur more likely in the future. Is this sort of the argument you're
Well,
making?
no, but it does work though. Like that's the thing. You can
It
say this
has worked.
hypothetically, but it always works. It literally always works. If I throw the ball, then it's gonna fly
It
as far
will
as I
or
throw it
has.
based on it will. If I pick up a baseball and throw it, then it's going to follow like Newtonian mechanics.
Right.
And
And how do you know that?
I can tell you that, and it's going to happen. And you can hypothetically say, but what if it doesn't? And what if the laws of physics magically change? But things in this universe do work a certain way, and they just do because we can observe that they do, like that, like it just happens, and it is happening at this very moment, and all points of reference from the present projecting into the future can like predict accurately things that will happen based on our understanding of things, because we've developed an actual understanding of things which continues over and over again.
Right.
to
Okay.
be
I don't
proven to
need
be
you to
the case.
assert the same point that you've already made. Like I understand that you seem to think
Well,
that
it's
because
like
science has been
self-confirming,
successful, that
really.
therefore it will be successful. I'm asking how you make that conclusion. I don't want you to just assert that it's the case. I want to know how you know that's an objective truth.
Like, are you asking me to like tell you what the scientific method is or something? Like,
No, I'm asking you the connection between what has occurred in the past, which has been successful, to future events. What is the logical connection between those two?
that's literally what I just explained.
You asserted it as the case. I want to know how you make the logical connection. What makes that have to be the case? What makes that an objective truth? I don't want to hear just because it has happened that it will happen. That's an assertion.
Well, let me put it this way: it takes more proof for you to prove the opposite. Like, if you were going to make the assertion that the sun isn't going to rise tomorrow because based on your philosophical outlook, science isn't objective, and you say that that's a possibility, then sure, but the sun is going to rise tomorrow because it does, and that's the trajectory that the celestial bodies are going in, because that's literally how the laws of physics work. Like, so
So at this point, you've done
you can't
nothing to
just
answer
deny
my
you can't
question.
like from your perspective, what you're
What
failing
is
to
my
realize
perspective?
is
What
that
is my
you literally
perspective?
have to
Hold
look
on.
up
No,
at the
no, no, no,
sky
no, no,
and
no, no,
why
no.
it's
If you're
blue
going
to
to
make that
characterize what
argument.
my perspective is, I expect that
You
you were
literally have
able
to look at the
to
sky
actually tell me what
and
my
say
position
maybe it's
is.
not
Hey,
blue, you
listen,
know?
listen, listen. If you're going to tell me what my perspective is, you better be able to characterize it correctly. So what is my perspective here? Am I saying that it won't come up tomorrow? Is that what my claim was?
What you're basically doing is making a non-argument to like question the validity of something that sure you can question, but at the end of the day, like all evidence that we can even rely on is on the side opposing the
What evidence
notion
shows
that
the future events? What evidence shows future events?
the evidence is literally in the behavior of how things behave, like in physical reality. Like, I
And
don't
so
know
you
if you
think
don't understand what
observations show us the future?
I think that we can gather data
Uh-huh.
and create a model
Yeah.
of how things behave,
How
and
they have
we can
behaved.
yes, how they have behaved, and create a model based on that, which actually accurately predicts and can be shown to accurately predict how things will behave, because we've gained an understanding of the mechanics of the behavior of those things.
And what is the justification that they will behave according to those models?
The justification is that those models literally correlate to things in physical reality. Like,
How do you know
like
that? How do you know that there is physical systems that they correlate to?
because they're literally observable in
No,
our
you've
reality, and
observed events.
they affect things that actually exist within our reality, and like, I don't know if you want to make like a solipsistic argument, but like, we can go
This has
into
nothing
that
to
if
do with
that's
solipsism. Like solipsism has to do with whether there are more minds than one. So I don't even see how that's relevant.
well, before you kind of like asked how do we know that this reality is real,
No,
or
I didn't ask that
something
either.
like that. You
This
asked
is
something
all just
like
a
that.
problem of induction. I'm asking you how your observations, which, like, you can make models, you can see that the models have worked. How do these relate to whether they will work? I'm asking, can you make an objectively true statement about that or show any logical connection between these two events? I've already said that I think there are pragmatic reasons. There are reasons why we follow these models. They're all pragmatic, which means they are useful to us. I don't know how to even live in the world if these models fail, right? But that does not make it an objective truth. That does not make it something that couldn't be wrong. But science relies on them to be
Okay,
correct
so
in order to make models.
first of all, it's objectively true, like I explained, within the context of the system in which these things actually do behave the way that we model them to behave.
Right.
You
So
know
you're
what I'm
saying it's
saying? So,
objectively
like
true if we assume
whether
it's
it's an
objectively
illusion,
true.
whether it's a simulation, whatever you want to say, like it doesn't even matter because within the context of this universe system that we perceive as real, things objectively behave a certain way within that limited system. Even if it's just our frame of reference, things still behave the way they behave. Even if it's literally a solipsistic reality, you still like within the reality that you are trapped in or whatever, you literally experience a reality which is shared with other like entities, even if you're just imagining them and they don't exist, and it behaves a certain way. So like no matter what you say about the reality in which we live, within
Right.
that
I'm kind of going
context,
to want to move on from this point because the only thing that you do is reassert your point without making any logical connection between these two things. You seem to say it's within the context, but the only context that I see is that the assumption that they would
what
continue
context
operating the
does
same way
philosophy
is
take
that they
place
will
in?
operate the same way. So I
Think
think you're
about it.
just
What
making nothing but a
context does
circular argument.
philosophy take place within? It takes place within a realm that's even more further removed from objectivity because it takes place entirely within the mind. And the only philosophies that step out of that are philosophies which have actually evolved into something different, which is science. So science is like working on a different level than philosophy is. Philosophy is working within a mental realm of the abstract, and science is working within a realm that is at least objective within a limited context.
Yeah, I've already gone over this. Like the context that you have is that these models will continue on to the future, which makes your argument completely circular, right? Like I'm trying to ask for your justification on this point. The only thing you seem to have to offer me is a reassertion of your point. So I would want to go on to what you think the scientific method is, and we're going to see if we actually think that this is what can produce objective truths. Now, how do you think the scientific method operates?
You want me to recite the actual scientific method, or do you want me to like tell you my opinion on it?
Yeah, well, I mean, there's different ways that people think science operates, so I'd like to know which one you think is the correct one.
I think that you have to apply different specific methodologies to different contexts.
Uh-huh. Well, can you give me one? Let's do physics. How do you think physics operates? What's the scientific method of physics?
Physics is literally all that science like is
I'm not asking what
fundamentally.
physics
Like
is. I'm asking what the scientific methodology for.
all science literally comes down to physics. So you're asking the same question.
Can you give me a scientific methodology? Like any? I don't care which. You pick something.
All right, if I observe someone on a Discord server, and I observe their behavior, I can make basically a hypothesis about them psychologically based on the things they say, and then I can test that by just observing them further, and I can form a system where I like scale different personality traits on a spectrum, and I basically observe all their behavior and see if they fit into my model repeatedly. And the more they fit into my model, the more likely it is that I'm correct because it's being proved repeatedly by observable evidence, and I can tweak it with new data, and it becomes a theory instead of a hypothesis. And if I go far enough, it could theoretically become factual, and I could form like a complete psychological model.
Can you tell me what far enough means?
Basically like examining or like being able to understand all aspects of their psychology using like using probably some type of Orwellian system, like some type of mind control with some like brain chip or something.
Uh-huh. Right. So do you know what multiple realizability is?
Nope.
Okay. So let's say that there are multiple models, and they are all explanatory towards the observations that you're making, right? But they're all also conflictory. They can't all be true at the same time, but they all work. Right? Now we can take a look at a real example of this, Newtonian physics, right? We also have the fact that that's been overturned by Einstein's theories, but Newton's theories were extremely effective. They worked for everything you needed them to work for a very long time. Now, if nothing ever challenged Newtonian physics, we would have continued to believe in Newtonian physics because of their reliability. Would that have made them an objective truth?
Well, I see where you're going with this, I think, and like, how does philosophy not have like conflicting, schools of thought though? Like, how does this prove that science is any like less objective relative to philosophy? You know what I mean? Like
Well, if
relative.
neither of them are objective, then your proposition is false.
Well, no, because this on its own doesn't actually debunk, how I like justify the claim that science can be objective. It doesn't really address that because like obviously if you have
Yeah,
conflicting models, yeah, obviously it's possible to have conflicting models, but you work that out the same way you work out if it was a single incomplete theory. Like it doesn't create a contradiction in science itself if you have two contradicting models because like you work it out. It happens, you work it out, just like in philosophy where two philosophers have a different opinion and they use whatever systems they use.
yeah, that's kind of a non-answer. I'm asking you how you can get an objective truth out of multiple models that are contradictory, but they both work. So how do you believe in an objective truth if what we have are useful models?
Well, yeah, hypothetically, if we had two models which both work like exactly the same to explain something, but they contradict each other, then we would have a problem. But like
Right.
that doesn't make science any like less objective relative to philosophy. Maybe it makes science less objective, but it also makes philosophy less objective because it has the same flaw. You're pointing out a flaw that exists in philosophy and science at the same time, so you're just bringing them both down at the same time.
Even if that's what I was doing, your proposition would still be false.
It wouldn't be false because science itself would still be just as much ahead of philosophy as it is.
How is it ahead if neither of them are pursuing objective truth? How can it be ahead of philosophy and pursuit of
Science is
objective
always
truth
pursuing
if it's
objective
not in the
truth, and
pursuit of
philosophy
objective
is
truth?
Philosophy is sometimes pursuing objective truth. Science is always pursuing objective truth, and that's the difference between them.
Okay, no, I don't want a reassertion of the point. What I want to know is, how does that work with what I just said about multiple realizable models? How can it be in the pursuit of objective truth if what we settle on is what is useful as a model until challenged? Right? How is that an objective
most of the
truth?
time, listen, most of the time we don't really run into that problem. And so in scenarios where we would run into that problem, where like there's a totally different model that could explain something, that like doesn't change the
I mean,
like 10
literally, that's all science
trillion
has
other
ever done.
times that science was right, you know?
Science has literally always done that. They've used useful models until overturned. You're like, oh, we don't really run into that problem. That's exactly what science does. It continues to operate on a particular model
I didn't say we
until,
don't overturn. I didn't say we don't overturn models all the time. I said
right.
that.
But you have to find some sort of observable flaw within the model in order to even have a problem. But then if you have a particular model which is working at any given time, um, it's only as useful as it continues working, not as an objective truth, right? So this is why Popper made his view of science, which is that science is the elimination of falsehoods, not the a pursuer of truth. What we do is we continue to work on things until we find them false. All science can do is point out what doesn't work. So this would completely overturn your proposition if we go with the Popperian model. I'm wondering what model you actually use of scientific method that does say that objective truth is what science gets, because that is very an unpopular opinion at this point as to what science is.
I wouldn't say I use like a specific model other than like my own model.
Right. Well,
Like,
is your model held up by
like
anything other than you asserting that it's an objective truth? Like, how do you actually find an objective truth? If you think there's one truth in the world and that science can find it, I would like to know how.
science, you like is obviously something that can be wrong and that has limitations, but that doesn't make it less or equally objective to philosophy. Like I never denied that it has limitations or even flaws, but like it has actually worked, and I shouldn't have to explain how it actually works
Yeah,
in
you
like
really should in
our
this
like
debate.
everyday lives. So like within that context, like you can predict how things work, and it works. Like, and philosophy doesn't do that. Philosophy lives in a realm of the abstract that is not within this. It's not even on the same frequency as science, basically. Like philosophy literally compared to science, it literally just lives in your imagination. Like, I don't see where you're not making the connection here.
Yeah, okay. Well, I think you have an absolute nonsense view of both science and philosophy at this point. I asked you how science can find an objective truth. If there's an objective truth about this universe, I want to know whether or not science can find it. You seem to provide no models of which would do that. What you're saying is that it has pragmatic use. I already agreed to that. I think science is great. I think it has very pragmatic use. I think we should follow the models because I don't even know how to live outside of them. But as for objective truth, you've done nothing to show that. So if you want to say, I don't think science can be greater than philosophy if it doesn't actually search for objective truth. Unless you tell me the model for science finding objective truth, then it cannot be greater than philosophy at doing it.
Well, that's not true, because the fact that science actually is able to produce models that work in the actual physical reality is literally self-evident and self-affirming, that it's on a higher level than philosophy, because philosophy can only create, philosophy deals with abstract truths, science deals with physical truths, and yeah, there are levels of truth that we can't deal with, and science can't be 100% accurate about what the true nature of things is. And science, because scientists are human and because science has limitations, yeah, sure, science is revised and changed all the time, and has plenty of limitations and plenty of flaws, but what it does is creates physical models that work and are proven to work repeatedly. And philosophy is lower than that, basically, on the objectivity spectrum, because science is objective within the physical frame of reference under which we operate, which is self-evident,
Oh
and
my God. There's
philosophy
nothing
is an abstract.
self-evident about it.
What's
Like,
self-evident about it is that you're literally using a computer right now, therefore I win.
how is that self-evident of physical laws? I mean, we've already been through this. I already agree that there's pragmatic reasons to go to science. You seem to try and skirt around my points by
Well, it's
reasserting the
like not
objectivity.
relevant,
But all
it's
you've
not.
really done in this debate is concede to the fact that science
I'm
can't
not
find
conceding
objective truth.
anything. You want me to tell you like an exact like methodology? Like what? Do you want me to like explain to you how we came up with the fucking theory of electromagnetism or something? Like I don't need to do
Is
that.
that what I
You're
asked you?
using your
Is that what I
computer. I
asked you?
don't need to
Is
do
that what I
that.
asked you? Did I ask you for the theory of electromagnetism? Yeah, no, I didn't. All right. So don't go with this bullshit. Now let's talk about actual philosophy then, right? Since you want to shit on it so much. What do
Suck
you
my
think that
North
any
Korean
scientific
nuts.
hypothesis is based on? Categories of understanding, right? In any way that we conceptualize a hypothesis, we have to use both our language and our understanding of things in order to put those into categories. Now, all those sorts of critical thinking techniques are always going to be applicable to creating hypotheses. You see, so in
You
what
never
way do you
actually
think
justified
philosophy?
your definition, your very definition of philosophy. Actually, you never even like justified like how you leapt from knowledge to assumptions in your definition here. Like
Assumption
what?
is something you take as true. That's really all it means. You just take it to be the case.
But it's like you're saying foundational bodies of knowledge though in your definition, and then that like turns into assumptions. So like, do you know? Like obviously you know what the word knowledge and assumption means, so you're admitting right there basically that like your definition of philosophy is that you have to assume knowledge of something, and that's what separates. That's the very thing that separates science and
Okay, you
philosophy,
seem to
because
have no idea what the hell I'm
you don't
saying.
need to actually make the assumption that your theory is true to have a working model of things that is actually falsifiable, that you don't have as a belief. But is, that's exactly what makes science more objective, is because it recognizes its own inaccuracy and doesn't claim anything. It doesn't claim anything to be knowledge. It doesn't make any assumptions. It's human scientists who are wrong because they make assumptions, because they fail to think scientifically enough.
Uh-huh. So you're saying that they don't. You're saying it's a pursuit of objective truth that makes no assumptions. Listen, I'm not using assumption in the way that I mean a guess, like you're guessing something, right? I'm using assumption in the terms of I take this to be true in order to proceed. Right? Now that can be a justified belief. It doesn't have to be unjustified. I'm using just assumption as this is true, now I can go do this other thing. Right? So one of the assumptions that science uses is that there is an objective reality, right? It would be very impossible for science to continue on without something like that. Well, actually, I don't actually think that's impossible, but in contemporary science, that is one of the assumptions, is that there's a physical world, that it operates under certain laws. These are assumptions that it goes along with and then proceeds with its epistemology. Did you really have a problem with what I'm saying there?
Well, you're using the word knowledge and then you're using the word assumption. So yeah, I do have a problem with that, because you're like admitting basically the very core difference between what makes science more objective.
Can you repeat back to me what I said, because it just doesn't make any sense to your response?
Doesn't make any sense that you can't make sense of my response. Your inability to make sense of my response doesn't make any sense.
Are you just like conceding at this point? Like you
No,
can't track
I'm
what's
not
going on?
conceding. I don't need to repeat back what you said in order to.
So you don't know what I said. Basically, this is what's coming down to. You just don't understand what the hell I was saying, and now you're just flapping your gums.
Yeah, I had to like go pack a ball. I smoke a lot of weed while I'm having debates.
Okay. Well, I'm pretty much done.
Yeah, sounds like a plan. So I guess at this point we can decide which voting poll you guys would like to go with. I know you're